90% of the staff, 2/3 of the doctors, 90% of the people who wrote to the Community Health Council, all been ignored. And so this question of choice, this government giving people a choice, the choice has been denied.
And from the local Labour MP, there were warnings that trust status could mean worse services for patients.
These opted-out hospitals are cutting the services, closing the beds and sacking the staff, and that means a worse service. And so I'm convinced it will mean a worse service for East Birmingham Hospital.
The hospital management were unavailable for comment this afternoon, but in a statement they said the new arrangements would mean better, not worse, healthcare, and they pledged there would be no compulsory redundancies for staff.
That's it for the moment. Central News will be back at 5 to 10 tomorrow. The weather follows now, but from all of us here, a very good night.
Well, it all starts later tonight. It's a bit breezy out there at the moment, but it's nothing compared to how it'll be tomorrow. Dry for most of us tonight, temperatures down to 7. After midnight, though, the winds will start to get stronger, bringing showers to the northwest of the region by morning. And by then, it'll be noticeably windier for all of us, especially in those northwestern parts. Showers around there still as well. The wind's getting very strong for the afternoon, gale force gusting up to 60 miles an hour at times. Bottom part of the region more sheltered, but still windy. And cold, temperatures only mustering an 11, that's 52 Fahrenheit, and a wild Thursday.
At ITN.
The UN Secretary-General Pérez de Cuéllar is flying to Britain this weekend to see John McCarthy, the freed Beirut hostage. Mr. McCarthy has brought a letter from Islamic Jihad, which is thought to invite the UN to negotiate a Middle East hostage exchange. They'll meet at RAF Lynham in Wiltshire, where Mr. McCarthy is recuperating.
A few days of good food, rest, loving care and attention, and the physical side of his recovery we expect to be quick. The emotional, the psychiatric side, well, I will not delve into that.
In Beirut, the spiritual leader of the Iranian-backed Hezbollah has denounced the kidnapping of another Western hostage there.
A very real problem. So in fact what's supposed to happen is that you're supposed to sort of retreat wearing your suit into some sort of negative pressure tent and change it every few hours. And if you can imagine doing that in the context of a battle, I think that it's obviously pretty impractical.
So if these chemical weapons are eventually used and are dropped on perhaps Allied troops in the front line, are they sufficiently protected against it, or is really the only retaliation that the West or the Allies can use against that something of equal horror?
Well, there are two questions there. I mean, the first thing is I don't think anyone knows whether they're adequately protected against it, because there's never been an occasion in which these weapons have been used against forces who have been equipped with the suits. There certainly will be casualties in quite considerable numbers, because the weapons, I think, are more powerful than the protection that there is available for them. But I don't think that you have to retaliate kind with kind. An eye for an eye is not necessarily sensible military strategy, and it's certainly not moral strategy.
Do you view the future of this war with great dread?
Yes, I do. I think that there has been unleashed in the Middle East now, in the Gulf, a conflict we can't actually see the end of, with the increasing calling into play of a whole range of new weapons, of which chemicals and potentially biologicals, which are much more serious, may well be used, and I don't think you can see the end of it. And
once they have been used, they will become legitimised almost.
I think the genie came out of the bottle with Halabja, and it's what several of us said at the time, and there was a great opportunity to protest at that point, and the West did not take it.
Professor Stephen Rose, thank you very much indeed. Professor Stephen Rose from the Open University. It's now about 4 minutes past 3. Let's go over to Brenda Rowe.
Thanks, Richard. President Bush has said that after 1 week of Allied operations, Operation Desert Storm is right on schedule. Speaking at a military awards ceremony in Washington, Mr. Bush called Saddam Hussein a tyrant and said no one should weep for him anywhere in the world. Martin Collier reports.
The President was speaking at a gathering of military men in the United States, but his comments were clearly intended for wider consumption.
There can be no doubt. Operation Desert Storm is working. There can be no pause now that Saddam has forced the world into war. We will stay the course, and we will succeed all the way.
Mr. Bush then laid into Saddam Hussein over the Scud attacks.
Saddam has sickened the world with his use of Scud missiles, those inaccurate bombs that indiscriminately strike at cities and innocent civilians in both Israel and Saudi Arabia. These weapons are nothing more than tools of terror, and they do nothing but strengthen our resolve to act against a dictator unmoved by human decency.
And obvious pride in knocking out Iraq's nuclear reactors.
We dealt a severe setback to Saddam's nuclear ambitions. Our pinpoint attacks have put Saddam out of the nuclear bomb building business for a long time to come.
The president then evoked the words of John Major.
And whatever his fate may be, said Prime Minister Major, I, for one, will not weep for him. No one should weep for this tyrant when he is brought to justice. No one, anywhere in the world.
Mr. Bush's comments have raised the temperature in the war of words being fought far from the desert front line.
The head of the United States Army has said the Iraqi forces will be cut off, then killed. General Colin Powell said Allied air raids had knocked out Iraq's 2 nuclear reactors. Considerable damage had also been done to Iraq's chemical weapon capability.
The success of the Allied strategy in the air war has been widely debated in recent days. General Colin Powell settled the matter with some finality.
This qualifies for the definition of air superiority. When you can operate in an unhindered way, as we have been operating over an area like this against an air force that size and with an air defense system that sophisticated, we have achieved air superiority.
America's senior soldier then turned his attention to Iraq's land army. The purpose of the campaign as a whole, as he repeatedly reminded his audience, to drive Iraqi forces from Kuwait.
The Secretary pointed out, this is a large combined arms army. It has tanks, it has personnel carriers, it has air defense guns, it has very redundant, resilient communications between the different operating echelons of the Army. It has stockages of food, ammunition, and parts with the Army in theater, and they have a very elaborate supply system coming down from the interior of the country to sustain that Army. Our strategy to go after this Army is very, very simple. First, we're going to cut it off, and then we're going to kill it.
But the eagerly awaited bomb damage assessment of other targets, military installations, communications centres and the like, has begun to come through. The detail revealed not from the original photographs, which might give away secrets, but with the aid of drawings.
You go strike it, you get an assessment back of the amount of damage you have inflicted on the facility. You go back and strike it again. This has received enough damage that I would suspect that the targeteers over in Centaf are not going to waste a sortie at this time going back and taking care of this last remaining building. These were the key ones. These 3 fed into what was happening at these 2 facilities. And so we have essentially destroyed this, even though there might still be a building standing. And I'm just using...
He held out still the hope that all this might make a land war unnecessary, but at the end a clear statement of America's determination.
We have been trying to tell everybody in the beginning that we would do it in time and do it as smartly as we can. We're in no hurry. We are not looking to have large numbers of casualties, but it is an integrated campaign, each part of the campaign bearing some relationship to the ultimate objective of ejecting the Iraqi army from Kuwait.
General Powell was, of course, trying to reassure the American public about the progress of the war, but his message was also intended for Baghdad. Behind the military strategy, an extension of the diplomatic strategy that Washington followed before the conflict began. An effort to convince Saddam Hussein that America has both the will and the ability to see this through to the end.
Iraq again fired Scud missiles at Saudi Arabia and Israel last night. 1 Scud was fired at Tel Aviv. Patriot missiles brought it down. 3 Scuds fired at Dhahran were also intercepted. And in Riyadh, 2 Patriots were fired to intercept 1 Scud missile.
The Patriot missiles rise into the sky above Riyadh once again to counter the incoming Scuds and disappear behind the clouds. Then 1 Scud is intercepted and falls to earth, sending up a cloud of smoke. On the eastern seaboard and in the north, 2 more missile attacks were underway. In Dhahran, Patriot missiles successfully intercepted and destroyed another Scud. In Riyadh, after an hour's search, we found the remains of a missile lying in open ground outside the city. Experts tested it in case it had carried a chemical warhead. Eventually, they gave their verdict: the remains of an intercepted Iraqi Scud, but no chemical warhead. Sandy Gore, ITN, Riyadh.
The 2 RAF pilots injured after their Tornado crashed into Saudi desert are now back in Britain. The Ministry of Defence said navigator Michael Heath and squadron leader Peter Batson have been flown to the RAF military hospital in Swindon. RAF Tornadoes may begin flying at a higher altitude to minimise the risk of being shot down. 5 Tornadoes have been lost.
An RAF Tornado crew blast off on another daredevil mission. Nobody in the air war is taking greater risks. In the cockpit, the pilot and his navigator can be heard in the final moments of a bombing run deep into Iraq.
Right, climbing off the target. It's good. We should be going soon. 1 mile to release. Right. We're getting the odd stuff coming up near us. On way. Okay, they've gone. Come left, climb.
Mission accomplished. Several hours later, the warplane arrived back safely at